people in power believing that the less advantaged in communities are not able to choose their schools, or that they don't know what's best for their own children. There's just a couple of quotes from earlier this week in Kentucky from a lawmaker pretty much saying, oh, we can't have this because, those types of families might not be able to choose. One of the quotes was, I heard in committee that families should shop around. We're asking our most disadvantaged, least engaged families to shop around, as if they can't shop around for themselves. They continued later on saying, in Virginia, 80% of recipients of those funds for the school choice program were from families making more than $100K a year. Those families, these are families who can navigate complex systems. And then they went on to go on about, what mechanism will be in place to keep parents from taking their kids out of a higher performing public school, the ones you might find in my area, into a lower performing parochial school. So all of these statements, I mean, we see them over and over again. It's the only argument against school choice, and it's most people don't say it out loud, because it's this fundamental belief that they don't believe that ordinary people can choose the best situations for their own children when it comes to education. It's just a super paternalistic way of thinking about things.
For some group that thinks that they're here to smash the patriarchy, they sure are awfully paternalistic. Isn't that right, Karlyn?
Well done.
Karlyn, tell me. Go ahead, but I want to lead you into this one, though. Give your answer, but then after that, go with this. How do we help and foster the courage that we're going to need? I am worried about motivating people by fear. I would like to find a way to motivate us through some sort of positive energy.
Well, I definitely agree with that, but I just want to add on to this that yes, it is very difficult sometimes to see exactly what the students are being taught in schools, but what's not actually as difficult as you might think? Getting access to the teacher training programs, because a lot of times now they're putting them online. I've watched a whole bunch of them on YouTube, or they're public webinars that are happening that all you need to do is fill out a little form to sign up for, and you get access to their teacher training program. And oftentimes people don't, unless it directly applies to you, people don't think to go in and watch these things because they're like mind-numbingly awful, but B, it's just, it's extra time out of your day. But I'll tell you what, I sat in on a teacher training program not too long ago. It was a couple months ago. And one of the questions to the diversity trainers was, well, what do you do with children who are biracial, who have, a white parent and a non-white parent? And the answer was, you have to teach those students to identify with the non-white part of themselves, because the white part of themselves is the oppressor. These are the things that teachers are being trained to do. And that was taking place in the public, where anyone could sign up and go see exactly what they're being trained to do. So I think the first step towards, getting people to speak up is, frankly, people need to start paying attention. Listen, like when I read White Fragility, I very literally descended into madness in the reading of that book. It is an awful book. It is painful for me to read this stuff, and thank God for people like James Lindsay who make it a career to read this and interpret it for the rest of us. But we have to become aware of what is being taught in schools and organizations. Make sure you're reading their materials, because once you see what exactly they're teaching, for me at least, it becomes very easy to speak up and out against it, because it is so bad. It is so destructive. It is so incredibly racist that I don't know how a person in good conscience can see what they're teaching and not say, this is wrong. This is a battle that we fought and won in the 1960s when the Civil Rights Act got passed, and now we're acting like that has never happened. But I will say this too. I mean, the reality is this: if everyone that was against critical race theory in education or otherwise spoke up against it right this second, it would be gone. It'd be done. This is only supported by a very fringe element of society, something around like 12% of people. It is not a majority that support this ideology, but the rest don't speak up because they're afraid. We have to help each other. We have to support each other. And if everyone spoke up right now, this would no longer be a problem.
Chris, I'm going to come to you about the courage question in just a second, but I want to just throw out an interesting idea I had just now. In talking to Christopher Caldwell, the esteemed author and commentator, he really laid out a very strong case for why the Civil Rights Act of 1964 has created a parallel constitution in the United States, which is infringing upon people's First Amendment rights, rights of speech, rights of assembly, etc. And it has given birth to this whole activist apparatus that we're fighting with today. It seems to me that Caldwell has an issue with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and even the social justice warriors and the critical race theorists have a problem with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Is there anybody out there that still supports the Civil Rights Act of 1964? And I'm not talking about whether or not restaurants should have to serve people of all colors and whatnot. I'm just talking about the act as it was implemented and as it has been rolled out across the country. Interesting that there may be common ground on both sides against repealing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Am I talking out of my ass here?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think maybe it's quite possible. Yeah. No, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, I think, is important and has support from the huge majority of Americans in the center. And the criticisms, you have libertarian criticisms. I think Rand Paul has even talked about this. Libertarian commentator Charles Murray has talked about this, basically saying that the Civil Rights Act infringes on these rights of assembly, of choice, of the First Amendment, expression, speech. And then you have the left criticism from critical race theorists where they say, well, the Civil Rights Act doesn't go far enough because it enshrines a system of existing and pre-existing inequalities, and it provides protection for individuals, so it protects individual rights, but doesn't actually do the work of redistributing wealth along racial lines in a group manner, so protecting group rights and making sure that there are no disparities among groups. But I think both of those criticisms are wrong, but I think there is still a tension. I think the tension right now is we're still interpreting the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We're still fighting cases in the courts. We're still trying to figure out how it works in practice. And I think that we'll get there. My own view is that you had the Declaration of Independence that first presented the idea that all men are created equal. It was an imperfect world. They inherited a world of universal racism and slavery. But the founders did something heroic. They laid down the philosophy and they created the basic structure that those things, slavery and racism, could be eliminated over time. Lincoln talks about that. That was Lincoln's inspiration for the Civil War. He then consecrated that idea in blood and then enforced it by ending slavery. And then I think the Civil Rights Movement codified these ideas into law. And I think that the thing about civil rights law is we still need to figure out how it works. We still need to go through the kind of details. But at heart, I think it's a huge step of progress. And the other interesting angle, really quickly, is that the question is, well, critical race theory is anti-whiteness, right? I mean, that's a kind of a fancy multisyllabic way to say anti-white. If you're against whiteness, who are the people that embrace whiteness? White European people. So does the civil rights law protect white people? Does it protect males? Does it protect straight people? Does it protect all of those groups that were truly historically advantaged? And the answer is yes, it does. So now we're seeing this kind of very interesting thing where Republican state legislators are saying, well, we want to further explicate the Civil Rights Act to say you can't have anti-whiteness trainings. And the left doesn't know what to do because they're like, wait a minute, the Civil Rights Act was supposed to protect these groups, but actually it protects all groups. So this is another angle that we're currently fighting on and will make its way through the courts.
Always count on the Claremont guys to bring the context, historical context, and to give some good perspective. Thank you very much for that, Christopher. Corey, how do we start leading people from a place of courage and strength rather than fear? And I'm not saying that we're fear mongers here by any means, but it is true that we're reacting a lot of times to negative things and saying, look, parents, if you don't act, this horrible thing is going to happen. How do we change that around into a positive leadership rather than this reactive to negative stuff?
I think proponents of individual liberty and freedom need to start playing offense more than playing defense. A lot of the time it is reactions to negative things that are happening, but we should also celebrate good things that are happening. So Christopher with his legislation that he's tracking is promoting those things. I'm promoting school choice bills that are passing in different states. So I think giving people hope in that sense really encourages people to move forward as well. This year has been great for school choice legislation in particular. You even have some bills coming out of Congress to fund students. Rand Paul has the School Act, for example, to reallocate nearly all existing federal education dollars from buildings to people. It's probably not going to go anywhere, but it's still encouraging that these bills are actually being talked about and that leaders are putting this into the national conversation. It's more likely to happen at the state level, which is more encouraging, but I think we need to highlight all the good things that are happening. And then when we do highlight the bad things that are happening, we need to parlay that into, well, what do we do about it? Well, one thing that we can do about it is we can look at things like school choice to give you an alternative to the system that isn't providing adequate education for your children.